All right, welcome back to Fundamentals of Philosophy. In this module, we're going to be discussing the philosophy of mind, which is one of my favorite topics in the field of philosophy. And we're going to do this similar to what we did last week, in the sense that we're going to break it up into 3 videos. This is because we have 3 topics that our readings are roughly organized into. So we're going to try to do 1 video for each one of those topics. Hopefully they'll be a little bit shorter than last time. Module 3 has a lot of material in it, the epistemology module. And let me know. Let me know if it felt like that had too much stuff. I feel like that one is a little overstuffed for an accelerated online course like this. It's a lot of material. And I rely on your feedback to know what's working and what's not working so that I can help make this course, future versions of this course better. So let me know how that was for you. And at the end of the term, you'll have a chance to submit feedback. Anyway, consciousness. Philosophy of mind, consciousness. So consciousness is at once the most familiar and the most mysterious of all phenomena. We all know our own minds with greater clarity and greater immediacy than we know anything else in the world. We each inhabit our own private, blooming, buzzing universe of sensation, memory, and imagination, and we inhabit it entirely alone. We are all locked out of the other universes that exist in the other minds that we pass by on the street or in the classroom. We are all ultimately alone together. We have testable empirical theories for everything from the largest supermassive black holes to the tiniest subatomic particles. But we don't even have a working hypothesis about what a scientific theory of consciousness could even possibly look like. The apparent subjective first-person character of experience remains entirely untouchable by the third-person tools of empirical science. We know our minds best, and yet we know it not at all. We know them not at all. And for billions of years, there were no minds to know. The conditions necessary for something like organisms with minds to emerge are a recent development, cosmologically speaking. The vast majority of the history of the universe is the history of inert, unthinking bits of matter blindly moving about, following the laws of entropy. But for one unimaginably brief moment, some of those bits of matter started thinking and asking questions and composing poems and symphonies. And when we're gone, when that brief flame flickers out, it's back to inert, unobserved matter for the next several trillion years. Or is it? To know the answer to that question, we first have to try to figure out what sort of thing a mind is in the first place. And to do that, we're going to ask 3 questions. This module will cover the basics of 3 major questions within the philosophy of mind. First is the question of whether consciousness is indeed something separate from and other than the physical world of matter and motion. If so, how can something non-material possibly interact with something material? This is the question of mind-body interaction. Second, we will investigate what David Chalmers calls the hard problem of consciousness. And by the way, if anybody gets really interested by the questions of philosophy of mind, David Chalmers is an incredibly good writer, and his material is very accessible and very thorough. He's a huge figure within the philosophy of mind, and I highly recommend his work on the topic. He's got a book, actually been rereading it in preparation for this. It's called The Conscious Mind in Search of a Fundamental Theory. It's written a little while back, but it's really good, and it's a great survey of the field. So, for the second question, we will investigate what David Chalmers calls the hard problem of consciousness. There's an easy problem of consciousness, which involves explaining the physical properties of the brain and the nervous system that underlie or correlate with conscious experience. This problem isn't actually that easy, but it is at least scientifically explicable. The hard problem, on the other hand, is what sort of thing is it to have a conscious experience? And why do we have them at all? Why do I have this experience and not that experience? Third, and particularly relevant in our current historical moment is the question of whether consciousness is something unique to human or certain animal minds, or if it is the sort of thing that can be replicated in a machine that is constructed to perform the same sorts of functions and operations that a human mind performs. But more simply, can artificial intelligence ever in principle produce conscious experience? Silicon Valley certainly thinks so. So we're going to start. This video is primarily going to deal with the mind-body problem. And we're going to start, of course, with Descartes. And I'm not going to go over all the steps of Descartes' cogito, how he gets there. I covered that in the last video. So hopefully you guys are up to speed on that. The second part of the meditation, or at least an excerpt from it, is included in the readings for this module. But Kahn splits them apart. I kind of lumped them together in the last one to hopefully tell a more complete story about Descartes. Anyway, so I'm going to assume that you already know that stuff. So we're going to begin with the problem of mind-body interaction. When Descartes split the world into res extensa and res cogitans, remember the extended thing and the thinking thing, he created a space for scientific inquiry regarding the world and theological belief about the soul to coexist more or less independently. But he also created a problem. Princess Elizabeth of Bohemia, a noteworthy philosopher in her own right, who for a long time was forgotten by history and only recently has sort of been given the credit that she's due for being the person who originated this critique, which has been foundational, was probably the first to point out the issue to Descartes. A brain causing a mental state makes some sort of sense, right? Extended physical things cause other things to happen all the time. We're familiar with that process. Physical stuff causes things to happen, causes other physical things to happen. But it's not so clear how a non-extended mental thing, which possesses no mass or position in space, can actually do any work in the physical world. How can something non-material cause something physical to happen, or cause anything to happen? How can it have causal powers at all? Since causal powers are the sorts of thing that matter in the physical world typically possess. That's our understanding of causation. Descartes' cogito can't transmit or exert any force or impulse. Those are both physical properties. It can't push or pull or seemingly interact with anything physical at all. This general problem of how an immaterial mind can interact with a physical body is known as the mind-body problem. Descartes' answer is that the mind and body are connected at a point in the brain called the pineal gland, which is right here. It's sometimes called the third eye. It's in the frontal lobe, sort of right in the center here. And it's a very interesting gland, and Descartes pointing it out. It has possibly some connection to dreaming, near-death experiences, psychedelic experiences, and things like that. So visionary, ecstatic sort of experiences. But so Descartes thought, okay, well, that makes sense. That's going to be the point where the mind and the body connect. But that doesn't really answer the question, does it? I mean, it kind of sidesteps the whole thing. Princess Elizabeth wasn't asking where it happens. She was asking how it happens. And Descartes never really had an answer for that. Nor, I think, has anyone else. So, not that people haven't tried. One particular strategy that the dualist might employ to avoid the mind-body interaction problem is to reject substance dualism, which was Descartes' position, in favor of some form of property dualism. And in your readings, Paul Churchland talks about this critically a little bit. Recall from Module 3 that a substance is the fundamental, unchanging essence of a thing that persists through time. Properties are the characteristics which depend upon substances, but are changeable and impermanent. For Descartes, for example, the substance of the cogito for the mind is that it is a pure thinking thing, right? While specific characteristics such as memories or sense perceptions represent the transitory or accidental properties that characterize it. So those may change. The sense impressions are changeable. they're not essential to the actual nature of the thing, to the substance of the mind, which is as a purely thinking substance. Memories can change, they can come and go. Sense experiences can change, they can come and go. All of these things are what's called accidental properties. In philosophy jargon, there's the difference between essential and accidental, and substance and property. So the substance is what lies underneath and grounds the properties. Unlike substance dualists, property dualists believe that there is only one type of actual substance, physical matter. But under certain circumstances, physical matter can give rise to distinct non-physical properties, such as mental properties. So the idea is that everything is physical. They're essentially physicalists, and they're essentially monists. They believe in one substance, not two. But they believe that there are non-physical mental properties that emerge in some cases, such as the case of the complexity of human brains. And Paul Churchland talks about this in the readings. He notes, however, that this position poses challenges. And I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into this and describe one version of property dualism in a little bit of detail. You're not going to need to know all the specifics of this, but I just want to give you kind of a picture. I think Churchland kind of glosses over it, in part because he's not a fan of it. But I wanted to add a little bit more context to it, because it's actually a very fascinating area, and there's a lot of good work in this region, or on this topic. So, for property dualists, the relationship between physical and mental properties is often expressed in terms of emergence. Where's my finger? Emergence and downward causation. There we go. There's the camera. Two things. Emergence and downward causation. What are those things? What am I talking about here? Emergence refers to the fact that physical systems, when they reach certain thresholds of complexity, when physical systems get very complex, sometimes they give rise to new properties. And there are two versions of this theory, a relatively uncontroversial one called weak emergence, and a more contentious one called strong emergence. Weak emergence, which is the uncontroversial one, pretty much everyone accepts that this is the thing, refers to cases where new properties arise which can in principle be explained and predicted in light of underlying physical facts. And I'm going to give an example of this. Neither hydrogen nor oxygen atoms are inherently wet. Neither hydrogen nor oxygen atoms by themselves are wet. But we can predict from the properties of each that if we combine two hydrogen atoms with one oxygen atom, water will emerge. We get water. That's the constitution of water. And along with water comes the property of wetness. And we can predict that. We can look at the way hydrogen atoms and oxygen combine, and the properties they have, and the properties that will emerge once they sort of interlock. And we can see where wetness comes from. We can predict it. It's explicable. It's an emergent property. It wasn't there before. You didn't have it in the parts, but it emerges when you combine the parts. That's weak emergence. Strong emergence, on the other hand, suggests that there are some properties that may emerge from physical systems that cannot be explained or predicted in physical terms. So it's something new, and it's something that you can't predict by looking at the parts or explain in virtue of the parts alone. Strongly emergent properties are not reducible to physical properties, and reductionism is the principle. It's usually applied in the term within the context of physicalism, with the type of monism known as physicalism, which says that the entire world is composed of nothing but the objects describable by a mature physics. That once you've physically described the universe, you have completely described the universe, and everything is reducible to terms used by physicists. So, strongly emergent properties represent something genuinely new and fundamentally different from the physical substance that grounds them. So that's for property dualists, that's the sort of thing a mind is. That's the sort of thing mental properties are. And they typically endorse the stronger claim and consider mind to be a strongly emergent property that arises from, but is not reducible to, underlying physical facts. So that's an important distinction. Downward causation is the other piece of this. It's a principle, or it's one of the other pieces of this. It's a principle which suggests that higher order emergent properties are capable of causing change in lower order physical properties. So for something emergent, you have the lower order physical properties that you have the hydrogen and the oxygen, and then the property that emerges, the water that emerges from their combination, that's the higher order phenomenon. So physics is usually considered to be lower order because it's more fundamental. It deals with smaller things that are the basis of things. You build other things up out of primary fundamental physical parts, and then other areas like chemistry and biology are considered to be sort of higher order and emergent. Based on that, but ultimately are generally considered to be reducible to physics. Chemistry, biology, etc. are considered generally in the scientific world that you can reduce all of those to physical explanations. So downward causation is the principle that higher order emergent properties are capable of causing change, to making a difference to causing something to happen in lower order physical properties. I hope that makes sense. So consider the action of raising an arm. Let's do the arm that's on camera. Consider the action of raising an arm. According to the property dualists, the raising of an arm could be explained by the subject wanting to raise their arm, where wanting describes a kind of mental state. You want to raise your arm, you intend to raise your arm, and this mental state causes the raising of the arm. This higher order mental state of wanting to raise the arm causes the lower order physical action of the arm raising. The arrow of causation thus moves in both directions, upwards from the physical to the mental, and downwards from the mental to the physical. That's why it's called downward causation. As Hume pointed out in our previous readings, establishing a causal relationship requires establishing some necessary connection. For mental properties, this connection is usually described as a type of dependence relationship known as supervenience, which sounds like a scary word, but actually isn't, and hopefully will make sense here. If not, don't worry about it. In the case of raising an arm, we say that the higher order mental state of wanting to raise an arm supervenes upon the lower order physical state, which is characterized by the firing of certain neurons in the brain. So your neurons fire in the brain. That is the underlying physical fact beneath the raising of the arm, and the higher order mental fact that causes the arm to raise is the wanting or intending to raise the arm, and higher order facts supervene upon or are dependent upon lower order facts. This sort of dependence entails the principle that there can be no change in a mental state without some corresponding change in the underlying physical state. So there can be no change in the higher order states without some corresponding change in the underlying states. And that's important, otherwise they could swing free of each other. There'd be nothing connecting them together. You could be in any mental state whatsoever, regardless of what state your brain is, and there would be no connection between mental states and physical states at all. And my dog is barking. You can probably hear that. The wanting necessarily depends upon the neuronal firings. So this creates a problem for the dualist. It seems as though the mental state of wanting to raise the arm and the physical facts of the neurons firing are each sufficient conditions, remember your necessary and sufficient conditions, by themselves to explain the raising of the arm. So the fact that you raise your arm is caused by underlying firing of neurons in the brain, which send impulses out, which cause your arm to raise. The dualist wants to say that they are caused by the mental fact that you're in the state of wanting or intending to raise the arm. The problem is that each one of these things seems to provide a sufficient explanation. And each one seems to exclude the other. Each one seems to be sufficient in and of itself to make the arm raise, that it doesn't need the other one. So which one is the actual cause? The mental state of wanting or intending, or the firing of the neurons? And there are two reasons to believe that it is the firing of the physical neurons that cause the arm to raise rather than the mental state of wanting it raised. First is the scientific principle known as the causal closure of the physical, which states that every physical effect has a sufficient physical cause. So the physical universe is considered to be a closed system, right? Where every physical state of the world is sufficiently accounted for by the state of the world which preceded it. And that's the basic deterministic mechanical picture of the universe, that every physical effect has a physical cause, right? Otherwise, again, we wouldn't be able to explain anything causally. We assume that effects don't just happen by themselves, that they are preceded by causes. Things don't just occur randomly. Although we're going to question that a little bit in the free will section coming up. So under this model, there is nothing left over for something non-physical to do. All of the causal work is done on the physical level. And there's nothing left over. There's no work for the mental to do. The second reason to think that it's the neuronal firings that cause the raising of the arm is the nature of the supervenience relationship, which states that any change in mental states depends upon changes in the underlying physical states. So the higher order depends upon the lower order. The lower order firing of the neurons thus appears to sufficiently account for both the supervening mental state and the resulting physical outcome. So it and the terminology, the way that this is talked about, is it realizes the higher order state, the firing of the neurons that the wanting or intending, that state of mind of wanting to raise the arm, depend on. That state of mind is realized by the physical state of the brain underneath. But the physical state of the brain also causes the next physical state of the brain, which is the state that sends the impulse to the arm to raise. So it's causing both of these things. It's making the mental state emerge, and it's making the arm raise. The physical state of the brain is doing both of these things. So the higher order mental state is thus causally excluded from making a difference to the physical world. This is a principle from the philosopher Jaegwon Kim called the causal exclusion principle. In my opinion, it's one of the toughest problems that I've ever encountered, and it's very difficult to find a way around this. And I've tried. Our mental states and subjective experiences are left with no actual work to do. They are simply along for the ride, a kind of inert residue or a necessary byproduct of the physical activity of our brains. So we're in this physical state that causes this mental state to supervene, to emerge, but it's got nothing to do. It can't affect the world. It can't change anything. It can't, the mental can't touch the physical. It can't cause change in the world. It's just there. It's just like floating above this unconnected, phenomenal experience that is just a passive spectator of the world, but can never actually do anything or change anything. And that's a pretty grim conclusion if you think about it. The arrow of causation points not both up and down, but only in one direction. There's no coherent notion of downward causation under this model. So our minds are reduced to mere spectators, witnessing actions that have already been predetermined by the blind march of physical causation. This is a position known as epiphenomenalism, and Churchland touches on this a little bit. And to me, and to a lot of other people, it appears to be both an absurd and a horrifying conclusion. Because for a lot of reasons, first off, it seems weird that nature would produce mental states if they couldn't do anything. If they're the one thing in the universe that is causally inert, that's unable to affect anything. And it seems horrifying because, right, you're just watching the playing out of deterministic mechanical processes, and you can't change anything. We're not going to go into it, but there's been experiments by a guy named Libet that seem to indicate that people, by the time someone makes a decision to do something, their body is already doing the thing. So the mental state of making the decision to raise the arm comes later than the physical impulses of, it was pressing a button in the Libet experiments. But this came before the mental awareness that you wanted to press the button, which creates, that's kind of a troubling conclusion. Anyway, epiphenomenalism is this idea that the mind, mental states, phenomenal experience is just this sort of residue of the physical brain states, but it's not able to actually do anything. And that, according to a lot of people, is where property dualism ends up, if you just draw it out to its logical conclusions. So, despite these problems, something like Cartesian dualism, substance dualism, became something like the default view within Western theology, science, and philosophy for hundreds of years. As we saw in the last module, not even the empiricists could avoid getting trapped in the Cartesian theater. In 1949, the philosopher Gilbert Ryle revived Princess Elizabeth's objections, although he didn't cite her, and used them to take issue with this position. I think he assumed that he came up with them on his own, but she came up with them first. It's just she came up with them during a time when, to be blunt about it, it was not considered like a woman doing philosophy, a princess who was, coming up with serious philosophical objections was not something that was socially recognized. And unfortunately, this meant that a lot of work got ignored for a long time that was really good. And now we're slowly in the process of rediscovering some of that. Although I'm sure we have blind spots that we won't become aware of, that other generations down the line will look back and be like, wow, you guys really had a narrow position. And that's the way it goes. Hopefully we're doing better as we go along. So, Gilbert Ryle revives Princess Elizabeth's objections, and here's how he does it. According to what he calls the official doctrine, and he's talking about Cartesian dualism here. Humans are understood to live what he calls double lives. The life of the body is conducted within the publicly observable world of physical time and space and follows deterministic mechanical laws. Right, we can all observe this happening. We see each other. We actually exist in space and time, and we interact. And you can see what someone's body is doing, how they're behaving. And this is a position called behaviorism. In addition to this, according to the official doctrine, every person has a secret second life of the mind, which is not observable publicly, does not exist in any physical space, and to which each of us has a sole and private, what's called privileged access. It means that we're the only one who can access our mental states. That's something that everyone else is locked out of. It's something that's private and personal for us. We're the only ones who can access it. We're the only ones who can report on it. It's not something that's publicly observable. This position, according to Ryle, is absurd. He refers to it as the doctrine of the ghost and the machine. Famously, and that's become like a famous way of referring to this sort of idea, where the body is the machine and the mind is the unseen ghost that is supposedly operating it. This ghostly, immaterial thing that's like driving the body around, like a robot. It's a ghost driving a robot. That's what we are, a meat robot. This is not merely absurd, according to Ryle. it's actual nonsense. It's actually we're not saying anything. This is a logical fallacy known as a category mistake. There's a philosophical sort of term of art that's your position is so bad it's not even wrong. It's not even wrong. It doesn't rise to the level of coherence in order to say whether it's right or wrong. It's like not well formulated enough to even be wrong. It's not even wrong. But the important one for Ryle here is the notion of the category mistake, which he introduces. So, to flesh out what he means by a category mistake, Ryle imagines a visitor to a university. The visitor sees all the various classrooms and offices and people and all the stuff. He visits the administration, and he walks around. He talks to students, and then at the end he's like, okay, I've seen all this stuff, but where's the university? You've shown me a bunch of classrooms and students and teachers and administrators and offices and things, but where's the university? I came here to see the university. But there isn't a university that exists outside of all that stuff. The university just is the classrooms and offices and the people and the faculty and the administration and everyone else who makes the sausage in the background. That's what it is. That's what it means. There isn't something over and above that's separate called the university. The visitor is using a concept that is only appropriate to one logical type of thing, which is the university or the classrooms and the offices and all the parts, and he's misattributing it to a completely different, inappropriate logical type. The question he's asking doesn't make sense. He's making a mistake about the type of thing he's asking about. He's making a category mistake. When the Cartesian dualists observe the public behaviors and interactions of physical bodies in physical space and still ask where they can find something called a mind, it's like they see people interacting, people in the world doing people stuff, and they're like, okay, that's great, that's behavior, but where's the mind? Where's this private, inaccessible, immaterial mind? According to Ryle, they're making the same category mistake. The mind is nothing but the publicly observable behaviors of bodies in space, and that's a position that's known as behaviorism. Of course, dispensing with the mind-body problem in this way assumes that we have a simple and direct understanding of what it means to be a physical body in space. And this is what Barbara Montero is going to put pressure on. And I think she makes some good points here. When we talk about the physical world, what exactly are we referring to? Do we simply mean whatever it is that physical scientists tell us? Just whatever physicists say, that's what we mean? It's, what's in the journals? But that's changed over time. I mean, right? Physics evolves. We went from Newtonian to Einsteinian to quantum mechanics. We went from Ptolemaic universe to Copernican universe, geocentrism to heliocentrism. Science changes. Science evolves. Theories are proved incorrect. As Carl Hempel, you might recall him from Module 2. As Carl Hempel notes, we cannot define the physical in terms of our contemporary physics, the physics we have now, because we know that our current theories are incomplete at best. And we know something like relativity and quantum mechanics don't work together. People have tried for 100 years to make them work together, and they don't. And there are theories like string theory that try to unite them, but these have provided no testable hypotheses, and honestly kind of risk falling into pseudoscience at this point. So we still don't have a good idea of how to put those together. We know that it's incomplete, and we know that we're wrong about some stuff. That a lot of the stuff, we've only been doing science for a relatively short amount of time. It would be very surprising if we'd figured it all out. If we had completed science at this stage in human history, that would be an incredible achievement, and we can be pretty sure that it's not true. That a lot of the things we believe now are going to turn out to be wrong. And at the very least, incomplete. That they're going to be missing a lot of pieces. And we know this has to be the case because our theories currently are missing parts that would make them work together. So we can't define the physical in terms of our contemporary theories because we know it's incomplete and it's wrong. But we can't define the physical in terms of some future completed physics either. Like, when we talk about the physical, what we're talking about is what, scientists will eventually converge upon in the future when they finally get physics right, when everyone finally finishes the job of a physical scientific description with nothing left out and no mistakes. When we finally get there, that's what we're talking about with the physical. But here's the thing, we don't know what that's going to look like. By definition, that's in the future. We know that we're wrong now. And if we knew where we were wrong, then we would already know that future physics. We don't. We don't know what a future completed. We don't know if there can be a future completed physics, but we certainly don't know what it looks like. So we can't mean either of those two things. So we're caught on the horns of a dilemma there. We're not referring to physics now, and we're not referring to physics in the future. So what are we referring to? Montero suggests that maybe we're just referring to anything that's not ghostly, spooky stuff like Cartesian, immaterial, non-extended minds. No ghosts in the machine. And she's poking at Ryle sort of directly with this. But our contemporary microphysics is riddled with spooky theoretical entities that contradict our empirical intuitions regarding matter and extension. Quantum mechanics is weird. Einstein famously rejected quantum theory because of its spooky action at a distance. But in 2022, just 3 years ago, 3 physicists won a Nobel Prize for demonstrating that Einstein was wrong. And that spooky action at a distance, it's what's called entanglement, quantum entanglement, is indeed a valid aspect of contemporary physics. All sorts of crazy, counterintuitive stuff that seems to break causation. We have effects that seem to precede their causes. We have things connected over vast distances where there seems to be no intermediary for them to be able to communicate or exchange information. We have things that exist in 2 states or multiple states simultaneously that seem to be some sort of objective, pure probability until they're observed, at which point they take on definite properties or characteristics that they didn't have before they were observed. We have a lot of mysteries to solve in that area, and things do look spooky. Einstein was right about that. Quantum mechanics is, the more you learn about it, the less you know about it. So since we know that our current physics has some spooky stuff in it that we don't quite understand, and we know that our future physics is something that's going to look very different from our contemporary physics, why couldn't such a future physics ultimately incorporate the seemingly spooky mental facts, such as an immaterial mind as well? And until we address these questions, we do not actually know what we mean when we ask the question, is the mind physical? Because we don't know what the physical means. That's an ill-defined question. What does the physical mean when we say, is the mind physical? Can we reduce the mental to the physical? Unless we can provide a non-question begging definition of what we mean by the physical, then that's the wrong question to ask. And Montero calls this the body problem. And from her perspective, we've got it completely backwards. We know our mind very intimately, immediately and directly. She rejects Ryle's position on this. She takes for granted that we know the mental better than we know the physical because we have the sort of direct, privileged access to it that Ryle rejects. And that is going to do it for... we haven't resolved the mind-body problem, but hopefully we've been able to sort of explain why it's a serious problem. When Descartes pulled the world apart into the thinking thing and the extended thing, he created a real problem of how we put that back together again. How do we explain the apparently intuitive sense that we have that our mental states, again, wanting to raise your arm, is what causes your arm to raise? We want to say that that's the case. We want to say that our minds are doing work that they do exist, that we do have mental states, and that these mental states matter to the world somehow, that they're able to interact, that the mind and the body aren't just separated, completely walled off from each other. The question is, how do we get there? And that's still an open question, and people are still working on that. And if you have ideas, I'd love to hear them. And the next one's going to be on the hard problem of consciousness. And it's a hard one. See you then.